Hello friends, welcome to the MARE Podcast. Before we get started, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget that you can find more about the MARE project at www.marehamburg.com, and you can support the project and this podcast through Patreon. All the links are in the description. Enjoy! Hello friends to another episode of the MARE Podcast. We have Rebecca here tonight with us. Hello Rebecca, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And before we start, I think I should share a little story about you, because you are actually the first person who replied to me about this podcast. You didn't know that.
Oh.
You're just finding this out. You were the first person who replied back to my email about this podcast. So you were the first confirmed episode. And yes. So first of all, to congratulate you on this, I'm using a new microphone today. Second of all, even though you're not the first episode, you were the first confirmed episode. And I have to say that in Rebecca's email, she wrote some very nice and warm words about how what we're doing here is important. And I think it was like the first email I received, and it was overwhelmingly nice. And I want to thank you for this, because this is something that we discussed with the MARE people about doing, and we thought it was important. We thought it was something that we should do. But at the same time, we were not sure if this is just in our heads, of this whole project, this whole podcast about young researchers and we believing that they have something to say, and
Yes.
and hearing it from someone who is not in the MARE committee saying that this is important and we should be talking about this was very nice. So thank you. Let's start by saying thank you to you for saying those words. They were very
This is
nice.
nice to hear. This is nice to hear as well, because I didn't know this, so I'm glad that I was able to provide some sort of extra enthusiasm to the process of sort of launching something new.
Oh yeah, of course. Let's hope that this goes well, and your warm words find a place in the world, that this is actually something that makes a difference in the field of maritime archaeology. But anyway, enough from me. Do you want to talk to us about yourself? So let's start from where you're from. Where are you right now?
Okay, so I'm Maltese. I'm from Malta, still in Malta. There were plans to leave Malta, and then I started a PhD in Malta, so still in Malta.
So
Yes,
if you
so
would leave Malta, where would you go? What were the plans?
I do like Northern Europe. I wanted to go. So after my bachelor's, I was aiming and building up to start a master's at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands, focusing on museum studies and archaeology. However, things changed. Nonetheless, I still aim to work in Northern Europe. Nowadays, I'm seeing that more my field would be in, for instance, Sweden or Denmark, even possibly the UK. So we'll see what the future holds. I definitely don't want to be on the small island forever, as anyone who's grown up here very well knows. It's a nice island, but when you've been in one place for too long, especially a small place, it gets a bit much.
Oh yeah, I get it. As a Cypriot, I get how it is living in a small island all your life and wanting to leave the small island. But we can talk about island syndrome later on. So you talk about cultural heritage management, and this is what you're doing, right? Cultural heritage management. So you want to talk to us about a little bit about your research and what you're up to.
Yes. So currently, my research focuses on deep water, cultural heritage management, and communication. I chose deep water rather than underwater just to be a bit more annoying, fill a bit more of a lacuna, because that's apparently just how I like to be. Um, but in reality, a lot of the research that goes for deep water can also be, transplanted to underwater. So I generally say I study underwater cultural heritage management and communication, and I very much emphasize management and communication in tandem, since I really do believe that you can't have a management framework without having a communication framework, and vice versa. So currently, I am building a framework for the creation, management, and communication of deep water archaeological parks in particular. Very lucky here in Malta. I have the case study of the Schlendi Underwater Archaeological Park, which is a deep water archaeological park. And I have been able to learn from this case study, which has been great, as well as use it to compile this framework that I'm discussing in my thesis.
And which year of your PhD are you? You towards the end?
Yes, I am. So I started my PhD in 2020, just as COVID began.
Oh.
Um, and it was meant to be a 4-year PhD, so full time, 4 years because I don't have a master's. I kind of skipped that step since the university that I'm from allows for that when you have certain, according to certain conditions. So there was 4 years full time. I ended up having to take a suspension of studies, which extended it to 5 years. So 5 years should elapse in March, but things that occur during the PhD that you don't account for have necessitated that I extend it until September. So this September will be the end because I just can't do it anymore.
Oh, you can't do it anymore. So you are one of those people that grew tired of their research, or you grew tired of like the PhD life.
I love my research. I enjoy it. It's just I when I was when I started out my research, it was during COVID, which was a major blow because I wasn't able to do the practical part of my research at all. And also, as anyone doing a PhD knows, a PhD is an extremely isolating experience. So when you don't have a network, which usually you build up in your first years, it's kind of it is very difficult to find that enthusiasm to go on and really understand, like, what am I doing? And am I doing the right thing? And who can I ask about this? Who can I discuss things with? So, and that's kind of what led to the suspension of studies. After which I was fortunate because COVID had passed, the masters that we have at the University of Malta opened up again for the underwater students. So I was able to attend some of those lectures, network, form a group of like-minded friends. And that helped a lot. So, and then, conferences are happening again. You travel to conferences and everything is just so different. So I really believe that had I not started during COVID, it might have taken a different trajectory.
Hmm. Very
It's
interesting.
just
So, yeah.
after 5 years, it's tiring.
Oh yeah, I get it. I get it. But what made you go into the PhD in the first place? Because you
So
skipped the master, so you were dedicated. You went for it like straight for that PhD. Because some people would say that, oh, I did my master's just to see if I really like research, if I really like, doing this kind of full time. And if they do, they go into the PhD. If they don't, they go into other things. So what made you go into that PhD straight away?
as I said, I was aiming to do a master's in the Netherlands. However, I was approached very soon after, I think it was even before I actually graduated from my bachelor, so around November of 2019. I was approached by my current supervisor, Timmy Gumby, to meet up for a meeting, and it was quite funny. And I thought it was related because that same week, a job vacancy for a coordinator with the Underwater Cultural Heritage Unit at Heritage Malta opened up, and I applied for it. So I thought that Timmy was going to talk to me about this. However, he waited specifically until after the interview so that there wasn't a conflict of interest, so that he would present an opportunity that he wanted someone to embark on, which was research upon the Schlendi site. His angle was more scientific. He wanted someone to study pottery types, categorization, and also how we can numerically quantify the amount of pottery on the site. So this is an area that I would not claim to be a specialist in at all. Pottery analysis, anything, anything using computers, not really me. However, he did say that, look, you're the first person I've approached. So if you have a different perspective that can be taken to the Schlendi site, then let's discuss that. And immediately I said, well, I'm aiming to a more museological field. I'd like to work in a museum later, and I really want to study how we can communicate what's in museums better with people. And thus was born my thesis, basically. So I really went into it because, well, I was approached by Timmy, when someone approaches you, immediately you feel like a bit more honored, like, oh, like if someone saw this potential in me, then I should do it. Skipping the master's step at that point didn't seem like a big deal to me because I knew that if I was going to do a master's, then I wasn't going to do a PhD because a master's abroad would have cost quite a bit of money. So if I were to do a master's in Malta, which would have cost significantly less, it would be a master's by research. And I felt like I could still gain the same experience by doing, instead of a 3-year PhD program, a 4-year one. So after deliberating it a bit, it seemed like a great opportunity that if I turned down, I would regret, and that I was sort of a, a way was paved for me to reach a position or a qualification higher than I had anticipated before.
Yeah, very interesting. Very nice to see professors, like tenure professors, approaching students with potential and offering this kind of opportunities. And I think it really shows if someone is maybe in their bachelor years doing something similar, that if you're if you care about it, and if it looks like you can do it and you have potential, things will happen eventually, no matter where you're from, no matter what you think you're doing. But I wanted to ask you a bit more about your choice of research, because you don't hear much people say the words that you just said. I don't like pottery. I want to work in museums, because I think it's kind of joke in the archaeological community that everyone does pottery nowadays. And if you go into a lecture about pottery, you see it's 70 people, and it's like a cult of the people doing pottery. But you said no to pottery, and you seemed really, really dedicated into working on museums and communicating archaeology. So I wanted to ask to pick your brain a bit on that. Why you wanted to do that? Why museums? Why communicating archaeology?
So I don't, I can't trace back a point where this interest was born. However, I do like stories. I like telling stories. I've always liked writing stories. Writing was a great outlet for me. I had English at A level, which is the level you're studying when you're 18, and I used to love to write. And in fact, before I had chosen archaeology bachelor's, I wanted perhaps journalism. So I always liked telling stories, and so I carried that with me throughout my bachelor years, and I realized, well, we've studied a lot here. I go home to a family of scientists, okay, a family of chemists. And what I'm telling them, they can't relate to. Then I'm going back to university and I'm learning all these things. I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. I'm going home and telling them what I learned about it. They're not understanding this. And I'm realizing there's something missing between the wonders that we learn at university and how rich this culture that we're exposed to in this academic environment is, and carrying that to the outside world. So what I wanted to see was if our museums are really sort of delivering on that, making that link between the academic and the public. And that year, my final year as a bachelor student, Tim Shadlahal had visited our university, and he was talking about a specific museum in Edinburgh, I believe, that was using contemporary art within the archaeological context to sort of explain different facets of the archaeological story. And I was like, that is so cool, because for a long time I have various interests. Okay, so I like history of art, I like architecture, and so on and so forth. For a long time, I was seeing things very black and white, very like tunnel vision. And now I'm seeing how we can learn about things in different ways, and how, for example, my very scientifically minded, like chemistry, medicine oriented family perhaps could take an interest in archaeology if it was presented to them in a way that was more appealing to them. um, uh, as a child, I wasn't taken to museums a lot. My parents were not the type, sort of, and they would go abroad. Would go to the science museum, for instance. So this is not a criticism to them, but it's funny because normally you find people working in museums as people who've been going to them all their life and have been in love with them all their life. But I think the fact that I wasn't taken to them as much um, created more of an appeal. So, and then at the age of sort of 16, once I started discovering that there are these artifacts and these paintings and this and so on, and more about this artist and this sculptor, and so in different museums, there was like an impetus to know more, to learn more. Um, and as I said, I do like filling lacunae. I am that annoying person that kind of wants to see what is in there and try fill it. And I feel like now, over the past 20 years, we've really been seeing on how the museological field can develop and how we can communicate stories better. And so I guess naturally within this environment, I felt like, yeah, I think this is where I'm supposed to be.
Lovely, lovely to hear. So, in your country of expertise, which is Malta, I suppose now, do
Mhm.
you think that the museological culture has improved over the years? Do you see change in museums in Malta, or do you think that they're a bit stale?
So I work at Heritage Malta as a museum educator, and I've been working in this position for about 2 years. So I can't really tell you over the long term what I've seen a shift in because it's only been 2 years. Before that, I was working 4 years in monitoring, so I can't really comment on it fully. However, I can tell you that there is a lot of work and a lot of effort being done to create programs for different people with different needs of different ages to attract them to these museums. So it's not only the museum itself and what digital media we're using to communicate things, but also what activities we can create to attract people to the museum, even in a non academic is the wrong word, but like a to make it not seem like an educational venture, for example, as like a leisurely venture. So, for example, in Malta, we have this villa called the Villa Portelli. Um, and now every Sunday it's open to anyone for free who wants to have a picnic there. So I think great strides are being made to transform museums into places that you wouldn't think of them to generally be sort of just places to go and see artifacts and learn about them and leave. I think we're really moving towards how we can have more active participation in museums, how the experience can be more meaningful, like on a personal level. So I think we're definitely taking great steps towards that goal.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, for me, it's a very nice experience if you get kind of a personal interaction with the past. And it's not just something that's behind a glass door that I see from afar and I can't touch it when in reality that's my immediate past and that's the material of my predecessor. So I think it's a very nice approach to follow in what you're doing, that what you said about doing picnic in the villa sounds wonderful. I would definitely do it. And I mean, if someone goes to do a picnic, they'll be like, oh, since I'm here, how about I learn about all that stuff that's around me and surrounds me? It's so nice. So I have something came to my mind, and I want to ask you. So let's say, for example, that I am an archaeologist and I want to go to a museum anywhere in the world. It's a stupid question, but what's your favorite museum? Why would you suggest me I go there?
So I feel kind of like an imposter saying this because I haven't been in 10 years or more. But the British Museum has always remained in my mind the most wondrous place ever. And I've been there. Honestly, I don't think I was older than 14. And maybe I had been there also a year before that, so I had been there twice in my early teens. It still remains this wondrous place in my mind. And I'm saying I feel like a bit of an imposter because I don't know if I go tomorrow if it will still have the same impact on me if I walk in. But honestly, I think yes. I have a very photographic memory and I can just remember everything still.
Okay, that's you were giving me a wonderful kind of pass through to talk about a lot of things. Because me, I mean, I live in the UK, right? So I've been to the British Museum at least 3 times the past year, and on the one hand, it's amazing. right? It's an amazing museum. You go in, you see literally everything. And I don't think, I honestly don't think that you can walk around the British Museum and get enough of everything in a single day. You need a couple of days. That's just my opinion, because I remember the first time I went in, I spent 5 hours in the museum and I still would not reach the Egyptian levels on the like the first floor. Uh, and I would say I am exhausted and I need to come again to see the rest of it. And I remember skipping half of the museum after 5 hours of looking at things. Of course, me, I'm overexcited and spend a lot of time looking at archaeological stuff. On the other hand, a lot of people now listening would say, yeah, but it's stolen, right?
We had this discussion today, in fact, and I was so my colleague was speaking to someone who works within the education department in Malta, and he was stating how the British Museum basically has, a bunch of stolen artifacts. Nothing is actually theirs. And I said, yeah, in fact, the weirdest feeling is going to the Acropolis Museum, standing in it, looking at the Acropolis, looking back and seeing like half the frieze of the Pantheon. So that's very odd. Like I have to say, it's like you're there, you're in Greece, okay? You're in Athens, you're in the Acropolis Museum, you're looking at the Acropolis, you're looking at the Pantheon, or you've seen it earlier that day, and then you're looking behind you, and only half of it is there.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, there's a funny story where I've been to the Acropolis Museum a couple of years ago, so not recently, but I remember vividly how petty they were. And on the pieces of the frieze that were missing, they would put a yellow sticker with BM on it, British
Oh,
Museum, and I'd say, "Oh yeah, that's petty." But I mean, what do you think? I want to hear. Like, you're an expert on museums. What do you think? Should they like give them back? Is it even possible to give something back?
this is such a nitty-gritty, right? Because there are so many protocols when we talk about acquisition and legal acquisitions. So you have that layer of law. For instance, I heard today that if it was acquired during war, then legally those who acquired it have the right to keep it. However, if it was sort of like pillaged in some like raid of the city, then not. So I don't know the specifics of this. Honestly, I haven't looked into this area much at all. However, I can tell you that it's very odd to be in a place some like called the Acropolis Museum, and parts of the Acropolis are missing. That being said, I am aware of the fact that not everyone is going to have the opportunity to visit Athens, to visit Rome, to visit so and so. So there is a certain benefit to the fact that there are pieces of art, artifacts, so on and so forth around the world. I mean, I went to Berlin and I saw the Ishtar Gates. I wouldn't have seen them otherwise. I think if that place can offer the best protection and exposure to the artifact whilst, balancing that protection and preservation with the responsibility to allow access to it, then that should be considered. So, if, for instance, the Acropolis Museum is not going to be able to take in visitors anymore, then I don't think that they should have it back in that case. I think if we had to weigh things out, then definitely there has to be a sort of who can offer the best preservation vis-a-vis access experience that will both honor the artifact and humanity's right to access it.
You're right. I mean, your arguments are right, but someone would say that the Acropolis Museum is newer than the British Museum, more modern than the British Museum, so it could offer better protection for the artifacts rather than the British Museum. And I get the argument that some museums, like the British Museum, will give better exposure to the artifacts, but at the same time, I still think that Athens is not kind of a B list destination if you're going for antiquities. Or that's how I feel. Like that it's not like a destination that you won't go. Because if you want to see the Acropolis, you will go to Athens. And
Yes.
yeah, but at the same time, if someone asks me, do you think they should give them back? I'm like, yeah, but I don't think that it's fair to only give the Acropolis, the Parthenon frieze back, and leave the rest of it behind, right?
Precisely.
Because if
Yes.
they give them back, I would say that no, the fair thing to say is to give everything back. But if they give everything back, then nothing will stay in the museum, right?
Yes, nothing will stay in the museum, and without coming from a perspective of kind of wanting, things to stay in the British Museum because it's the British Museum, not necessarily should all artifacts be sent back to sporadically end up maybe not even being displayed at all, or not being displayed with their contextual partners, for instance. So something it's not odd, but in Malta we have these two candelabra that were found with inscriptions on them. It's a Phoenician inscription on one and Greek on the other. It's like our Rosetta Stone. And one of the candelabra is in Malta, and the other one is at the Louvre. Right now, I believe, or soon, they should both be here for an exhibition, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that they were together for an exhibition last year somewhere in the east. So that's nice in the sense that you're reuniting them. However, see, like they're twin candelabra. Why are they separate? But it was legally acquired by the Louvre, so you really can't argue that now, can you?
I mean, sure, yeah. I think yeah, the situation is very difficult to change. Really, it's as you said, some were illegally acquired, some would say illegally acquired for other uh, material evidence that were carried, and during a time where like there was war in Europe or there was so many things going on, and the last thing people cared about were antiquities. I mean, it's a first world kind of problem that we solved everything else, and we're like, oh yeah, and let's talk about where do we take our antiquities in the museums. And I completely follow that path of thinking. But anyway, let's go back. I think to the underwater maritime world, right? This has been this is a conversation that can go on for hours and hours and hours.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask you some to interpret something that you wrote, of course. So it shouldn't be hard, but you wrote at the heart of my research. It's subverting the perception of out of sight, out of mind when it comes to maritime archaeology. And I think this is really beautiful. And I want you to explain to me what you mean by subverting the perception of out of sight, out of mind.
Okay. So out of sight, out of mind is a phrase that I hear a lot, read a lot. My supervisor loves to say it a lot. And I think subverting that perception is the heart of the current work that's going on within the underwater cultural heritage sphere in Malta. And what I mean by that within my thesis is highlighting that technology is progressing. Nowadays, what was previously inaccessible is in some way, shape, or form accessible. What continues to stay out of sight? So, if we're not going to access something and then share it with the world, it's going to always remain out of mind. In the sense that if I don't know about something, then it's not there. If I don't know about something, I don't care about it. When you need me to care about it, I still won't care about it because it's out of my sight, it's out of my mind. I can't see it, I can't relate to it, it's not tangible to me. Subverting this perception is really important because a lot of people you say underwater, they're like, whoa, like how can I even relate to this? I can't see it, I can't touch it, I can't feel it, I can't smell it. How am I going to experience this? When you do the work, and I want to highlight the importance of doing the work to make underwater cultural heritage accessible to people, you are making an effort not only to sort of deliver, fulfill your duty in delivering that experience, communicate that heritage, but you're also having it form part of their entire experience in life, okay? Contributing to their identity. So what previously they never even knew about, never even saw. Now it's part of their history. It's part of their culture. They're now aware of it. So yeah, it was always there. It was always part of their culture. But if you're not aware of it, if you don't know, if you can't see it, especially if you can't see it, then it doesn't exist. So when and then it comes to, for instance, when you need to finance projects, when you need to safeguard, when you need community support, one cannot pretend that they are going to find it naturally because we have a moral obligation to protect our heritage just because it's heritage and we should protect it. You can't pretend that people are going to care about something that they don't have access to, right? So the same way, I can't have people fund the renovation of my house because they don't have access to that. That's not public. They can't see that. So the same thing with underwater. For a long time, I think, and I think still nowadays, a lot of research goes on. Not I think, a lot of research goes on and nothing ever gets published. We all know this. Or things take 20 years to publish. We all know this. I think the role of heritage managers is to disconnect from the entire experience, of excavating, documenting, and so on and so forth, and figuring out what we've learned from this experience that people can benefit from, so that we can communicate what people can understand. Because for me, it's not important that on the shipwreck you tell me I found this, that, and the other, and an entire catalog of things. It's important that you tell me that we learned this from this shipwreck. It's possible that the ship was coming from here, it was coming into Malta for this reason, it was carrying these people, it sank because of this reason. The story is extremely important. So I think when it comes to subverting perceptions of out of sight, out of mind, I think this is what we need to sort of realize more, that when we communicate, we are contributing to the safeguarding, and we can't assume that people will care about something that they don't know about.
Very nice. And I mean, it makes sense if we know about it and we embrace it as our own, then we protect it and we care about it. So I wanted to like tap onto this a bit more and ask about the protection of underwater cultural heritage because I imagine it must be very difficult, especially if it's not something coastal and as you say it's deep water like a shipwreck. How do you monitor that? How do you safeguard that a random group of like I don't know CCR divers with underwater scooters will not come scooping in, grabbing a bunch of things, and then leaving, and no one will realize ever. So how do you protect that?
Well, so with deep water, you're in more of a fortunate situation, right? Because everything is what we say below 50 meters, so beyond the typical range of scuba diving. So the amount of people that can access it is significantly less. So you're already at that advantage. Um, People know that sites exist underwater. It's no secret. It's not like you can assume that, oh, but it's 100 meters deep, as if anyone's going to find out. People know. So, for instance, we have the SS Polynesian, which is a shipwreck near the in Valletta, our capital city. It's a ship that wrecked very, very close to Valletta, which was very popularly known as the plate wreck. Why? It had many plates. Many plates were taken home as souvenirs. So, are there many plates today? No, no, not as many as before. Um, so the plate wreck was kind of notorious for this sort of pillaging. With the establishment of the Underwater Cultural Heritage Unit in Malta, a lot has changed because suddenly there were restrictions to visiting these sites. Before, there was no regulation. People could visit it, and technically nothing could happen. Um, Now, there are a number of sites which are under the remit of Heritage Malta. You cannot legally visit them without booking a ticket and going through an entire procedure of having an authorized dive school take you on an authorized boat, which has been approved by Heritage Malta. So there are entire, very detailed procedures that are followed when someone's going to visit the site. Now, we know and the divers know, because this has spread around amongst the community, that the plate wreck is no longer accessible free for all access. You need a ticket. There are wrecks which are publicly accessible. You can go anytime you want. You don't need a ticket. You don't need to tell anyone. But there are those that are not. So this word has spread. So that's already a good thing. But spreading the word's not enough, right? If I spread the words but I don't care about it, makes no difference to me. fostering a good relationship amongst the dive community is going to change the entire situation. So the underwater unit has worked a lot, and Timmy Gambin especially has worked a lot to collaborate and foster a great relationship with local divers. Here we have two main dive clubs, and a lot of the divers do form part of dive clubs, and so working with them, even on our own projects, we get volunteers from them, we collaborate with them to deliver some sort of educational activity, offer excursions, discounts also to our site, so on and so forth. By having that good relationship with the community, you are taking steps to not only prevent any damage to the site, but forming people to safeguard it as well. So people that are assimilating that site with something that they should protect, we're making the effort to have them understand why they should protect it and why now we're no longer allowing them to go to the plate wreck and steal plates from it. Then naturally you've formed your sort of custodians, if you will, that they're going to safeguard the site themselves. So building that community relationship and harnessing that support, in my mind, is the only way that you can protect something that you cannot physically build a gate around. Um, I really believe in this. The basis of the management strategy I propose within my thesis is bottom up, is community. I don't think that anywhere in the world, especially when we're talking about coastal sites. Now, when we're talking about international waters, that's a totally different story. But we're talking mostly, coastal sites. Think of your parks, think of Bahia, think of the Baltic. These are all coastal. People know about them. There are communities which have a relationship with them. They're very close to them. Without building that relationship, it won't work. And there are several different communities, not just the diving community, that's going to contribute to safeguarding and monitoring an archaeological site from illegal activities like looting and so on. You have your fishermen. In Malta, we have a thriving fishing industry. Nowadays, unfortunately, not so much individual, like small scale fishing, but larger. Having a good relationship with them is immensely important because, of course, they are carrying out their activities in an area which is shared. So, our interventions are interfering with theirs and vice versa. Having that relationship is going to aid understanding and aid even support for similar ventures, right? Because I help you, you help me. You have the local communities, just fishing towns. So, for example, the Shlendi shipwreck is located in Shlendi, which is a little fishing village. There are inhabitants, mostly seasonal inhabitants, but these people, take walks on the coast. If someone's diving there, you'll know because there'll be a boat. People talk, people love to talk. Having them report on these activities, but also having them know why we should be protecting this wreck, why this is not important to me as the Heritage Authority, but it's important to you, it's part of you, speaks volumes about what we can do for protection. When I was applying for government funding for my thesis, someone asked the question, but why would we make these sites known to people? Why would we turn this into a park? Why are you saying that education is so important and we should show everyone what there is underwater? Because and then everyone will know what there is underwater and they're going to go and take advantage of it. And that is true. But the educational basis needs to be in place, correct? Because I'm not going to go and broadcast that there are all these sites and finish my sentence there. We've spent loads of years here building up a community and building up an educational system within Heritage Malta as well, and even Timigam being of his own accord visiting schools, mostly starting from the children to educate them in these values. Once you have that, then when you introduce these things, these subjects to people, then you have to rely on that educational system to support, to bolster the site, because people are going to find out about them anyways. It's not enough to keep them hidden. People will know where they are. This is not the solution anymore. Nothing is kept a secret. Um, so I didn't get that funding, by the way. I don't think she liked me much. I don't think she agreed much with the stance. I do understand her perspective. Perhaps maybe even, knowing in the past cases that have happened where, sites were pillaged and, you can't trust people because people are horrible and they're selfish and they take everything on for their own. I do understand that perspective, but I really do believe that once you invest in an educational program, in harnessing relationships with the community, then you can really start to understand why the out of sight can't remain out of mind, and why when it becomes within reach, all round, everyone is going to benefit.
Oh yeah, and but my first question was how do you reach people? But you kind of answer that on how do you reach people? How do you get people to be interested in what you're doing? My first comment will be that I find it quite shocking that you went to receive a government funding about advanced. Usually, you told them, "I want to work for your benefit, your direct benefit," and they say no, because sometimes when you do some research in archaeology and you go ask for funding and you say, "I'm gonna study the amphoras that moved from no, Germany to the UK in the Roman period," someone would say, "Why do we care?" And I mean, they will be right to do so in some ways not, of course. But you went in and you're like, "I have this project that will directly benefit you," and they said, "Well, no, why should we care?" But yeah, I think you're absolutely right that, and now that nowadays information flies. There's nothing hidden. Nowadays, I can go to Google Earth and see the satellite images and spot out wrecks from space without needing to move from my couch. So I don't think the argument of people should not know is valid nowadays. But that's just my opinion. So let's just take, since I see you're kind of idealistic, you kind of believe in people, you want people to be involved in this. You're not in the pessimistic side of everything is grim and dark and people are don't care about anything. So what is your ideal scenario of like achieving a kind of like an amazing status of protection of cultural heritage? What's like your ideal world? Is it a world where people are don't need other people? Because you say we need to create an educational basis, and I agree, but I would say that this needs people, money, time, investment, involvement. So do you think that this is something that should happen for the next, I don't know, 10 years, and then trust the process that the kids will grow up and they'll teach their kids to protect them? Or do you think that in the perfect scenario, this is something that just keeps on happening? Because I don't know about Malta, but in other smaller places, the departments of antiquities are pretty understaffed. So how do you envision this? What's your perfect scenario? How do you see this evolving into the future?
There's no perfect scenario, and I'd like to highlight that, for instance, the work that we do at Heritage Malta doesn't aim at sort of creating a new generation of people that are, you know, morally inclined to protect heritage because of this and that. Our education is widespread, it aims at all levels, and mostly it aims to help people relate to areas that they've been living in and amongst their entire life. So when I speak of education, it's not strictly, like curriculum, if you know what I mean. It's, for instance, in the fishing village of Slendi, we set up information panels and even just pictures of the underwater site, of the research that has taken place there before. So back in the 60s, there were there was some excavation and retrieval of artifacts, and we have some really great images of them on a little dinghy with like five amphorae on it. It's great. Exposing people to that in a context where they've not been exposed to that before. That's education. That's showing them what there is. Having people take an interest, fostering, introducing something new to them. There's no proper way, but in a sort of control, not even controlled manner. I don't know the word specifically, but sort of just going out and telling people, oh, don't you know that you have a shipwreck here? Yeah, it's like rich. There's a lot of pottery, a lot of pottery. Yes, for sure. And telling them, like, did you know that there's this Phoenician shipwreck here? And in the past, there were loads of research vessels that went out to find this pottery. And this pottery, actually, they're called amphorae. They used to carry oil from the east through to Malta, and they used to trade in oil here. And yes, these amphorae, some of them actually carried wine instead. Introducing them to that story can change the heritage site from treasure in their mind to heritage site. So I think the ideal scenario would be achieving as widespread as possible an understanding within communities, an awareness, and a perspective within them that views heritage sites as heritage sites and not sites rich in buried treasure. And I think achieving that is only going to happen through exposing them to these things, through offering them different experiences that can help them relate. So, whether it's going to be these billboards I told you about with the pictures, whether it's going to be a physical exhibition, a virtual reality, anything and everything that can reach them in a meaningful way is going to, foster that group of people that is going to aid the agencies, the authorities, in fulfilling the safeguarding mission. So earlier I mentioned bottom-up systems of management. I think in reality the most idealistic solution is neither, bottom up where kind of communities manage everything, or top down where the agencies and the government and the managing bodies doing everything. I think it's going to be a merging of both. So if a project is going to be enacted, yes, the push can come bottom up and it can come top down. However, you're going to need people with the expertise and the knowledge and the resources, very important, who are going to be able to put that plan into place and figure out what is needed, when this can be done, and who's going to do task one, two, and three. But then the community who are going to be needing, who we're going to need them to, one, support the entire venture, two, possibly look to them for their expertise, and three, ultimately, promote the venture. So support can come by volunteering. Expertise, we're constantly having divers with different expertise come work with us. We're not just archaeologists here, we're not just heritage managers, but having the community also support the venture is extremely beneficial, because if you're going to come in and out on a boat every day, and you're going to be met by, oh, these archaeologists or these guys taking a part of our sea, we can't fish there anymore. It's not going to be met kindly. The venture is not going to work. They're going to take a negative perspective not only towards you but to the heritage also.
Yeah, very interesting. So, do you think your research or kind of the model that you're suggesting can be applied to other places as well, non-islands, maybe other coastal towns? Have you received any feedback from like colleagues from abroad about your model, or do you think it's something that is very local to your context?
Yes, so I have done research to investigate what the pillars within the management systems of different parks throughout Europe are. And so I chose Baja in Naples, and I chose one of the Swedish parks of the Baltic parks as case studies to draw up a comparative analysis within the management and communication strategies that these parks are employing vis-a-vis Schlendi as well. And what I deduced is that every park has an element of community involved. It's almost impossible to avoid it. And then when you supplement this with, for instance, Della Scott Ireton, who is my co-supervisor, her research within FPAN and on the parks that she researched within her doctoral thesis, you will notice as well that the community is a large part, and that the FPAN, preserves, it comes from the people. The people put them up, for elevation to preserve status. So it's kind of really great. It's beautiful to see that community is involved, but it's really great to see that there are the same elements present throughout parks throughout at least the parts of the world that I've investigated. So I don't want to speak for the entire world, but I think I can speak from a large part. So we've got the Mediterranean, and then we've got Naples, and then up north in Europe, we still have the community being involved. In fact, one of the Swedish parks, the Dallar Park, um, that was created to bring more economy to that particular locality in which the wrecks are found. So there is immediately a direct relationship between community and wreck, why it's being invested in to make it a park and made public, and the community. And in its management as well. So not only in just its conceptual. So that was great to see, because at least this idealism can be escaped, see what's being done in practice, and then this will support the framework that I'm putting forth.
Oh yeah, and I think some people seeing the things more cynical than maybe you and me do would say that if there's a financial aspect to it, people will respect it because of that, and they will care about it because it brings money. I think there was this study about the treatment of animals in a community somewhere in the world. I don't need to name places right now, but it was talking about how people cared about their animals. It was somewhere in Africa because people will it because it has this financial aspect to it that people will go see not domesticated animals like elephants and giraffes and zebras. They would stop hunting them because tourism, safari tourism, will bring more money rather than selling the skins of the animals or the animals themselves or their meat. So there is this kind of other aspect, the more cynical one, that people care about it because it brings money to the community. People will come see the wreck. They will pay money for accommodation, for food, and etc. etc. So I think there's also that aspect that you mentioned. And I want to ask, out of ignorance, are there any kind of international agencies or committees that work on underwater cultural heritage specifically? Or I don't know, I think there definitely should be something preserving cultural heritage in general, but is there something about underwater specific? I honestly don't know.
So your question is making me think of an entire chapter of my thesis now,
Oh, I'm
in
so sorry.
which
I'm so sorry.
in which I tackled the dirt that exists in defining an archaeological park. And let me tell you why this connects to your question. Because I treat the park within my thesis as the epitome of public access. So when I'm creating a framework, I'm creating it for the creation, management, and communication of a park, because I'm viewing the park as the epitome of public access. So this park is going to be accessible. Park and access synonymous. There does not exist, like ICOMOS has for the definition of what a museum is, there's straight and plain text, this is what a museum is, for archaeological park. You're going to find it, for national park. You might find it even for amusement park, but there doesn't exist a definition of an archaeological park, let alone an underwater archaeological park, let alone a deep water archaeological park. So I think when you ask about if there's someone that specifically takes care of underwater cultural heritage management, well, there are a lot, right? There's Baya, they have a whole team, they have loads of projects surrounding it, but there is nobody, and what I mean by like no physical body, um, that's taking care of analyzing and regulating what we mean by an archaeological park and an underwater archaeological park. So there's a lacuna there. The, there is need, I believe, for standardization and regulation in that regard. And then perhaps we can start thinking of like a governing body for underwater archaeological parks that strictly conducts research for underwater archaeological parks, because we have discussed and we have set down guidelines for what an archaeological park is, what it needs, this, and that. The same thing that UNESCO have for their geoparks, for instance. There are geoparks. There are entire documents defining what a geopark is and the criteria and the application process and so many dossiers and so on and so forth. And this brings me to the crux of my thesis. I'm proposing that that we take steps towards having a standardized and regulated definition of underwater archaeological parks and base the process of defining one, creating one, and managing one on the UNESCO Geopark model, because that's an excellent model. It exists. Um, in 2015, ECOMOS met and created the Salala recommendation, which calls for defining what an archaeological park is. So this goes like even more sort of wide wide spectrum than my underwater research, because now we're talking about archaeological parks completely, totally, and entirely. And and then we're filtering it down to underwater parks, then filtering it down again to deep water archaeological parks. But I really think that before we do that, we can't really have like one body taking care of analyzing and discussing different management techniques and so on and so forth about like all the global parks. Because what is a park?
I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, what is a park? I can give you my definition of a park.
I mean, I would
Um,
love to hear your definition of a park. Can you say that, or is
I
it like not ready
can't
yet?
can't put it into 3 lines yet, nor can I pretend that I ever will, because this is going to, like ICOMOS met to create what the definition of a museum is. This goes beyond me, Rebecca Sherry, deciding that a park is this, this, and that. So I'm not going to pretend that I can provide that definition for you. But what I can say, for example, that in Bahia they have created their own definition for a park. Here in Malta, we understand park in a different way. In the Baltic, they probably understand park in their way. And then in the US, Della was telling me that, for instance, they called their underwater archaeological parks not parks but preserves, because people typically think of a park as Disneyland, an amusement park. So preserves was a more like direct way of communicating um, sort of scope of the park. But then I have an issue with preserve, because preserve is like preserving something, and where is the word access tying in with preserve? And then no, but that's a reserve, and it's so complex. There are so many words to describe different sites, trails, preserves, reserves, parks, that I think standardization really needs to happen. So, and then we can have like single bodies that are going to get best practice models and information coming in from different places, filter it, and then sort of produce that 10-page, 20-page, 100-page document that you can literally hand to the heritage manager, and they don't have to worry about if this is you know right, wrong, credible, done before, best practice or not.
Oh yeah, I can't stop being a silly goose. I started thinking about underwater Disneylands right now. I mean, wow, I'm having so many thoughts right now about underwater roller coasters or underwater like Disney parks. Anyway, let's move on. Like, I will stop thinking about that. Maybe it is something for the future. So I wanted to kind of see how do you see. I see that you care about a lot of things, and I see that you envision to do things and you want to see change in this aspect of the discipline. So you kind of mentioned in the beginning, and then we didn't talk about it much. But do you what does the future hold for you? What do you want the future to hold for you? How do you envision yourself in the future? What do you want to do with that PhD in cultural heritage management?
So I would really love to get into the curatorial sector. I would really love to work in a museum that's sort of in its infancy, creating the museum, and seeing how different methods and techniques that I've learned through this thesis, but also through my work as a museum educator, can sort of be put together to create a museum. Obviously for underwater archaeology, but honestly, at this point, I don't mind what museum it is. I just want to be involved in something new, something innovative that can reach people in different ways. So I'd like to do something curatorial. Then again, doing so much research on parks and the nitty-gritties. And my father wanted me to become a notary because I'm so attentive to detail, and probably I'm so boring that I would love to be involved in these discussions, in if we're ever going to create, like a convention or a document like the geoparks document, but for archaeological parks. Like I would love to be on the UNESCO team of doing that. So I think that's like an ultimate goal. That would be like the climax of my career. If that would happen, if that should happen. However, my interests are primarily curatorial.
That's lovely, and that's very concrete. You know what you want to do with that degree. You know where the road takes you. So, would you suggest to anyone else to join the field? Do you think it's worth it, or would you like suggest someone who is young, who is thinking about doing a bachelor's in archaeology? Would you advise them to follow this path? Is it worth it?
I think with archaeology, um, so not maritime archaeology, right? Let's just say archaeology.
Yeah, yeah. In a
The
bachelor level,
things,
yeah.
yeah, the things that you can do and the specialties that you can sort of branch off in are so diverse, that I would recommend that anyone do it, because even if you're not good at fieldwork, there's a place for you. Even if you don't like pottery much, there's a place for you. Even if you're like a hardcore like scientist, there's a place for you. It's so multifaceted that there's really a place for everyone. And it's funny, it's ironic. I'm not a diver, I don't dive, I've never dived, and yet I'm doing underwater archaeology. Like, it's not even maritime archaeology, it's underwater archaeology. um so in the beginning I was feeling so insecure about it, and Timmy always tells me don't feel pressured to dive and so on and so forth, but at the same time people would encourage, like, if you want to dive you can try. But in the beginning I'd get questions like, but why don't you dive? Oh, it's not scary. You don't need to be scared. But how are you doing a PhD about underwater archaeology and you can't dive? Even though I can't dive, I realize that there's a strength in that, because I want to communicate underwater archaeology primarily to people that can't dive to 50, 60, 70, 100, 200 meters. I can't do that. Most of the world's population can't do that. So, and then I started viewing it as like an edge, sort of. I'm naturally going to work harder to focus on that enormous sector of the population that can't physically access the site. So, even though I'm not a diver, yes, I still did archaeology, underwater archaeology. You're not a diver, you don't want to dive, you can still do underwater archaeology. You will be dubbed a rubber boot archaeologist, but that's perfectly fine. Stick to the rubber boots.
Oh yeah, this is the message you want to leave for this episode. Rebecca, this has been an amazing time. You, I can see that you really have a lot to say, and I really appreciate you being here and like speaking your mind and speaking your thoughts out in this podcast. So, do you have any closing remarks for us? Anything you would like to say?
Thank you very much for having me. I could go on talking forever and ever, but it's good that we end here because I'll start going off on tangents. That's great. Anyone that's interested at all in the Schlendi Park or further in the sector of management and communication of cultural heritage, please contact me. I do have my university email address, and you can find me also through Heritage Malta as well, if that's sort of the perspective that you're taking, if you want to contact me as a museum educator. And yes, I hope that this was somewhat interesting to people that were watching,
I think that was
listening.
supremely interesting. We didn't sit here for an hour and talk about hard archaeological evidence and finds. I think we talk about things that people care about, right? About how do we access our heritage. And as you said, how do we turn treasure into heritage? And how do we communicate that? So I think it's something superbly important. So thank you very much again. And I hope to see you all guys next time. Bye.
Bye.